could this be? The most pivotal summer in North London in recent times. What do you think, Martin?
Well, I think there's something to build on. I think what Arteta has given us a team that was certainly in a fight and competitive for a large period of this Premier League season, 15 points better off than they were last year. So huge improvements to finish into the Champions League in second position. Still some way off City, and maybe that 5 points flatters Arsenal a little bit because City had the job done, didn't they? But no, I think it's been a really good season for Arsenal. Just the way they fell off was they have to be critical of themselves. They would have expected to have finished far better, to have been, trailing against Southampton, the team foot at the table, was a pivotal day when they'd already had the West Ham game, the Liverpool game, which were games we were in front of, and they would like to have seen it.
That was nerves, wasn't it? Because the first goal came about by a mistake.
West Ham away? Are you talking about?
No, I'm talking about Southampton in the first 20 seconds of the game.
No, I think with Ramsdale was doing what he'd done all season, and maybe was just guilty of overplaying, but you trusted him to do that in all the previous games. So Southampton capitalised, didn't they, on overplaying from the back. And it was a game where I think it took a lot out of Arsenal, to be honest with you, having already come back from against Bournemouth earlier in the season in another home game. Those games against West Ham, I think Partey loses the ball, doesn't he?
Was that an error or was that overplaying?
Well, that was an error. And then Partey lost his place. And Jorginho came in, really good signing, good acquisition. I think it's going to be about acquisitions, and I think it's going to be about strength of the squad. They weren't even in Europe last season. Now, of course, they're going to be in a big way.
Can they win the league under Mikel Arteta?
I think they can. Whether they will or not, I think with Pep and the dominance that he has, I think we could be in for... This feels like just the beginning for Pep. Five Premier Leagues in 6, but this is a young group.
Just the beginning for Pep?
It is. Look at the team. Look, Haaland's coming. Alvarez is brand new. Akanji's brand new. Aki's formative season.
Just won the third consecutive
Stones. Everyone's getting way better, and I don't see that the Pep is tired, bored, had enough. I think it's perfection that he's building right now.
So they haven't got a chance, Arsenal?
No. I think Arsenal have got a really good opportunity to build upon what they've achieved so far this season. Haven't won anything, of course, but I like the look of the club. I like the people in the club. They've got the right people first. That's the right thing. The manager is really important. But they're up against City. They're going head to head, as Liverpool have found. Liverpool will re-emerge, by the way, this year. Yeah. But it's been an awful season for them. And it left the door open for someone, and Arsenal had a great chance.
Let's focus on Arsenal. And Simon, you said they needed £200 million investment just to finish in the top 4.
Yeah, I think in order to... Because we will see a re-emergence of Chelsea. We'll see a re-emergence of Liverpool. It'll be interesting to see how Newcastle get on, because I think out of the pack in the years to come that might change the orthodoxy in the Premier League might be Newcastle, because they've got the ability to be able to do it with the financial resources behind them, and that's going to happen. If people think it's not,
wealthiest club in world football.
Yeah, people will make the observation, and I thought that she was quite right to do it, Amanda Staveley. It puts pressure on people when she says they're going to win the Carabao Cup, the FA Cup, the Premier League, and the Champions League, but they're going to, because they're going to buy that position. They're going to spend a lot of money, and they're going to invest a lot of time in building the best in class, because the Saudis don't do second, right? Just get that into our heads. They're not going to do second, so they're going to have a battle at some point with Manchester City. It's difficult to see past Manchester City. Arsenal themselves showed a lot of frailties and fragilities that I didn't expect them to show in the last 7, 8, 9, 10 games of the season. They need a goal scorer that's going to score 25 goals a season, because Jesus is not going to do that. They need better centre-halves to be able to support them when players aren't fit. And they need more options to be able to change the game or protect the game.
I think midfield's another area, isn't it?
Well, that's the point I was going to go to.
Well, they're going to sign Caicedo and Rice,
and in order to do that, because the other thing that comes on the radar is, I'm not suggesting that the Gianni Van Bronckhorst experience is one that needs to be in Arteta's mind, but they went from getting the Champions League Rangers to being smashed to pieces in the Champions League, and Gianni Van Bronckhorst being absolutely trashed in the media and subsequently losing his job as a result of it. Arsenal have got a different landscape here now. They could find themselves in between two stools. They could find themselves going to the Champions League, not doing particularly well in that, and then finding it impacting upon their form in the Premier League, which is why I make the argument that in order to maintain where they are now, not just second but inside the top 4, they're going to have to invest and invest heavily.
That's the big challenge, isn't it? Because juggling Champions League football and Premier League football on a weekly basis is going to be difficult. This season we saw that maybe Arteta was overplaying the likes of Bukayo Saka in the Europa League games. He played in all 8 of those this season. Is that why he ended up being quiet towards the end of the campaign?
I mean, look, we are now in the longest Premier League season we've ever had. So we've had 11 months of fixtures of competitive football. and we do a month's training to get ready for that. So it's been a 12-year calendar for the players.
12-month calendar,
Yeah. So and normally we're looking at 10 months.
That's because of the World Cup in the middle of it, though, isn't it?
So that's obviously playing a part, and it's not ideal for such a young man, Saka, to be. I'd be interested to see now what part he takes in the remainder of this season, because we have two friendly games. Well, two competitive games for England, deep into June. So we finish in 16th, 19th of June with two more fixtures. So I expect maybe that Gareth Southgate might rest him. I don't know, but it's been difficult for Saka. But the underlying factor is Arsenal.
Well, the underlying factor is
they need to buy players, but it's buying the right players.
But both seasons have ended with...
You've got to be really... You can't make mistakes in the transfer market.
Let's go back to last season. They threw away a place in the top four. This season, they've dropped off at the last moment in the title race. Do they need to get players in that have got more mental strength? Is that something?
I think experience is a good one. I think it's heavy terrain that you go through, and it's mental gymnastics to try to stay in the race. And I think that's where they fell away at the end. Where Man City put them under incredible amount of pressure.
But that happens at the top of the table.
It does, but when they're better equipped now next season to deal with this. They'll know where the pressure comes from.
Well, they're going to get...
It'll be interesting, because that's the equivalency that people make, is that as a result of this experience, that they will be better, and that the younger players will come further forward, and it will be a better side. I don't think they will, unless they really supplement this playing squad. Because I think 248 days, I know these statistics can be used and whipped up and turned into something that they aren't, but in this instance, this team were on top of no one's been on top of the league in the history of the Premier League for a longer period of time and not won the league.
That's because there was six weeks in the middle of it where they were on top of the table because there was a World Cup. There's a lot of days in that.
Of course, I understand, but notwithstanding it, still, if you take that out of the equation and make it 204 days, it is still an inordinate amount of time to be top of the league, and I probably think that statistic will probably stand the test of time as well, as being the longest side. But you look at it and say, I think Arteta got found out against Brighton. I think he got found out against Man City, that there's only one way they can currently play. And when people beat that aggressive press, Arsenal don't know what to do next. And so they've got to look at the quality of player they can adapt with. But I think there's a lot more to be positive about. But I think if we're being realistic, if the ambition of the boardroom isn't as big as it needs to be, then I can see Arsenal finding themselves in a difficult season next year.
I think it will, though.
Interesting.
I think all the messages are that there's going to be money.
Yeah. But Rice is going to be a huge expense, right? In terms of wages and transfer
I've already said I
fee.
think it's too much money. I'm not so sure. You're saying Caicedo and Rice. I mean, have they got big enough pockets to do that? I don't believe they have. I think it'd be one or the other of those two.
Do you?
They've certainly got big enough pockets. Is whether they choose to.
Can they take both of those? I think now it's a lot easier.
Well, they're going to need both, aren't they?
Now
if
they're
they
in the
sell
Champions
Granit
League.
Xhaka.
But they're a Champions League. Well, now they're in the Champions League. Clubs will see that. Players will see that and say, okay, they're more attractive. Look what they offer me, Champions League football. They're the team that came second in the Premier League. Can they make the next step? So I think now they're a more attractive proposition for prospective players that are coming in. It's about identifying those right people and players.
150 million used to be sort of the benchmark that you spent every season as a big football club, right? In terms of competing inside the top six, 150 to 200 million. You've got Ten Hag coming out almost preposterously and suggesting that Man United didn't spend enough to match their... If you compare it to Chelsea, no one's going to spend that kind of money. But Man United spent 243 million euros last season. And Ten Hag is suggesting that they didn't spend enough and they didn't match the heavy spending of other sides, which is just nonsense. My point is this, is that's the level you're going to have to spend at now to be competitive. Now, what does that mean to Arsenal? Do they have the money? Well, we know Stan Kroenke certainly has the money. What does it do to their financial fair play by spending 250 million, putting people on 4-year contracts and having them depreciate at £60 million a year? Can they carry that? Because Arsenal previously have been able to carry it. And I would suggest that they can spend 150 million last year. They can easily spend 250 million this year because they've got an extra 30, 40, 50 million available to them by being in the Champions League. So all of those are just choices. They have a choice, and whether they want to make the choice to go to the next level.